Hello, my name is Michael Cowell, and I will be doing an economic country comparison between Australia and the United States of America. To first get us started with Australia, it's located in Oceania between the Indian and South Pacific Oceans, which is the only continent without glaciers. It is also the largest country without land borders, as it is over 7,700 square kilometers and has a population of over 23 million people, with the key demographic being 25 to 54 at 41.45% of their population. There's currently a growth rate of 1.03%, which is 119th in the world, as they have a median age of 38.6 years old. The government acts as a parliamentary democracy under a constitutional monarchy, which means they pledge their allegiance to the Queen of England while having their own Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull. The current GDP of Australia is $1.187 trillion, which ranks 20th in the world, while having a growth rate of 2.5%. They also are up from $1.159 trillion and $1.132 trillion in 2015 and 2014. The GDP per capita is $48,900, while the gross national savings is 22.4% of the GDP. By consumption, household is the highest at 57.3%, followed by investment in fixed capital at 24.9%, then government spending, there's a negative investment in inventories, and exports and imports of goods and services almost cancel out, as the imports of goods and services is only 0.7% higher than that of the export. By composition, the services department of the GDP is at the highest at almost 70%, with industry at 26.5 and agriculture at 3.6. The top industries consist of mining, industrial and transportation equipment, food processing, chemicals, and steel. Within the GDP, there's an unemployment rate of 5.8%, which is using the U6 metric, which is different from most countries and the United States, as they use the U3 method. There's public debt of 46.6%, and right now, one Australian dollar is equal to 77 US cents. The government plays a huge role in Australia's economy, as the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade coordinates the free trade agreements to ensure interests of agricultural industries to make sure Australians can have each industry without an additional tax cost. There's currently 10 free trade agreements with China, Japan, South Korea, their neighbors New Zealand, as well as the United States and many other small Asian countries. As a result, China, Japan, South Korea, and the United States are the top 4 export countries, and China, the US, and Japan are the top 3 import countries. There's also the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement that still has not been finalized, as countries are pulling out of it, like the United States did earlier this year. The government is also encouraging saving in superannuations, which is the retirement savings plan for Australians. They've also created a 10-year tax plan, which started this year, to encourage investment, productivity, jobs, wages, and living standards as the country transitions from primarily mining to a broader, diverse economy. The government has also changed the classification of a small business from less than $2 million to less than $10 million, which is resulting in over 90,000 additional individual businesses gaining access to concessions of small business tax breaks. Within the government's role of the economy, some of the spending that they have included is $5.5 billion to grow jobs, $5 billion to promote infrastructure in Northern Australia, $50 billion of infrastructure for a program, and they've also committed $2 billion for a water infrastructure. Meanwhile, the water has a 100% cleanliness rate. The Gini coefficient is the degree of income inequality to represent the distribution of wealth among a nation's residents. Australia sits at 30.3 from 2008 as the distribution of family income, which ranks 126 in the world, but they dropped from 35.2 in 1994. Driving economic issues for Australia include the standards of living declining for the past 4 years, which can be equated to an additional 7 million people since its last negative economic growth 26 years ago. There's also been a decline of fish in the MOU box, which is the surrounding waters between Australia and Indonesia. As they expand outside of mining, they now have more of a demand for resources and energy from Asia, while their decline in global prices of exports of natural resources, energy, and food have decreased the value of their dollar. Australia has had over 2 decades of continuous growth with low unemployment, contained inflation, low public debt, and minimal restrictions on imports of goods and services, as I discussed earlier how they have 10 free trade agreements. In comparing Australia's 20th overall GDP to the United States' 3rd overall GDP, behind only China and the European Union at $18.57 trillion with 1.6% growth, there's $56,900 per capita. There's an unemployment rate of 4.9%, which actually uses the U3 metric instead of the U6 that Australia uses. Within the GDP, the US has almost 30% higher public debt compared to Australia's 46.6%, while the US is at 76.5%. There's a Gini coefficient of 45 for the United States, which ranks 40th from 2007, while Australia's is still at 126th. As a result, $1 US is equal to $1.30 Australian, with the Australian GDP only being 6.39% of the US GDP. While these countries may have the same letters in their initials, their economies just don't compare in size. The US has a higher GDP per capita, lower unemployment rate, higher dollar value currently, and a higher Gini coefficient. As a result of all these factors, economically, it only makes sense to want to live in the United States over Australia. Lastly, here are my references for doing this report. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that you have a good rest of your day.